one, action.
Hey everyone, welcome back to In the Clinch with Braden, Holden, and Zach. Today we're basically going to be focusing on the lightweight division as we're a week and a bit out from the UFC 257 card with Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. So we'll just jump right into that. So basically, a very vague question for both of you is what's next? And Braden, you can go ahead.
Well, okay, I think there's a lot of options, but the one that makes the most sense for me, just right off the bat, and as soon as that card ended, I want to see Oliveira versus Poirier. I think the two of them deserve it. They're both on the probably the best win streaks in that division right now. Yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys think about that.
Um, Oliver versus Poirier, I'm super interested in that fight too, because that's just like that just seems like the sickest fight that that division can make right now. And there's so much more to it because Dustin just is so good on the feet that I think a lot of people will underestimate how well that he'll be able to, attack Oliveira from his back. But I still think Dustin would be smart to keep that fight on the feet. But that's definitely the same fight that I would think if they don't give the title to Dustin, just outright when they strip Khabib, uh, and I don't think Khabib's coming back. I think Charles and Dustin's the right thing to do as well.
Hold up, they're not gonna strip Khabib though. He's gonna vacate. Just gonna throw that
Well,
out there.
yeah, but if he already vacated, right? That's the thing. Like,
Yeah,
because to me, he already vacated. The only thing that's keeping him there is Dana White holding on to money.
yeah, pretty
So
much.
they're gonna be like, oh yeah, like we stripped Khabib of the title, but like I think even to Khabib right now, he's not the champ of that division. He
So,
retired.
so do you think, like, I know UFC in the past, they kind of, with Aldo and then Rousey, they kind of didn't necessarily have like a championship fight. They kind of just gave them the belt. Do you think Dustin Poirier will follow in that footsteps, and the UFC will just give them to them, or do you think they'll go big main event type thing just to get some more money?
No, it's definitely gonna. They're definitely gonna have to fight for the belt. I think like if you're talking about Aldo and Rousey, it's because they came over from other promotions where there wasn't a division in the UFC. So Aldo was a featherweight champion in WEC, and he came over when there was no 145 in the UFC, and that's why he got the belt. Same thing with Rousey. She came over with the women's division, and she was already the champ in Strikeforce, which is why that happened. Um, the lightweight division in UFC is so open. Like they're obviously going to have to fight for it. And I think again, Poirier and Oliveira make sense. Um, I don't really see anybody else who does make sense for that fight. I
And
think everyone else probably needs at least one more win before they can actually fight for a belt.
and I'm not necessarily agreeing with this. I'm just kind of playing like devil's advocate. Um, but since both of them are coming off of the KO losses, Chandler and DP, both have KOs. Marketing technically can lead towards both of them. Since Charles, although he is undefeated, he's had really good performances. He's still fairly unknown to like just the casual fans. Um, they didn't necessarily have anything on Chandler beforehand just because they couldn't use Bellator promos. But now that they do, do you think that's a possibility? Say if they want to look at it through like the marketing ways.
Um, I'd say no. Just because Dustin Poirier has been pretty open, pretty vocal for his character to say that he doesn't want to fight Chandler, and like I I see where he's coming from. Chandler, I mean, great debut, but he's only had one fight in the UFC. Um, and then on top of that, I think might might get some weird looks for this, but like I feel like the casuals have almost held that lightweight division up for a certain amount of time because of Connor and the return of Connor. And going into the fight, they talked a lot about um, when Connor wins, oh, Connor's going to get the title, and then Connor lost. So it's one of those things right now that uh, like I agree with Braden. There needs to be a fight for it. I don't think Chandler's in there. I think this is the time where, like you said, Oliveira's not known by a lot of casuals, but also, we're at the time now where you got to actually get on with that division, especially if Khabib is really gone and Connor's out of the title picture completely right now. So you got to get on with your
Okay.
division.
That
Yeah, and
that
and also to your point about the marketing, um, like now they have footage of a Chandler knockout, which is great if they were going to go that route of like who can they market the best. But they still only have less than 5 minutes of footage of him, right? Even if Oliveira is not that known, they can draw back so much because he's been fighting the UFC for like a decade. So a lot of the times, even if you're not a star, I feel like the UFC can make you a star if they really, really wanted to. And I feel like if they wanted to, they could definitely promote an Oliveira Poirier fight, especially if they pit kind of like the hardworking veteran story together, because both of them have been in the UFC for like basically a decade, right?
I think a little over that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. That leads to the next thing. So basically, when you look at, say, top five, who do you think matches up best? So like you guys agree with the like Dustin versus Charles, but what about like Gaethje, Chandler, Tony, Connor, even? If you had to pick, if you were the matchmaker right now, which would you pick?
I think because like I'm just gonna take Khabib out of the picture in my mind. I think he's done. I think Oliveira versus Poirier is the right way to go. I think Gaethje versus Chandler. I don't think Ferguson. Honestly, I don't think Ferguson deserves a top five fight right now. He lost last two fights to top five guys. I think he should fight under him first. Even if it's just to gain confidence. I'm not saying he's not skilled. He's obviously at that level, but there's something he needs to fix in his game right now, obviously. Even though he fought two of the best guys in the world, there's something he needs, even if it is just a confidence boost. So I think Gaethje fights Chandler. Or I can even see, RDA just came off a good win against Felder. I can see RDA going up number 7 versus number 2. And then I think I don't know. I'd actually like, and just a bit below that, I'd actually like to see a Dan Hooker Paul Felder rematch because that was a darn close fight and a really great fight to watch for 5 rounds. But yeah, I think it's Poirier Oliveira, and then personally, I would like Gaethje Chandler. I think that's the smart move for the division. But I can also see RDA fighting Gaethje, and then I just don't think Tony has a top five fight right now. I think that would be pretty stupid on his part to even take it.
I think you could always make the Tony RDA too as well. Tony's 5 right now. RDA's 7. I mean, you could probably do that one too. You could market it well, like the rematch. It'd be a good win for both of them as well, either or.
Yeah,
I
that's very
agree.
fair.
I think you could also maybe do Tony Diaz, if you want to have him fight down. It doesn't necessarily make the most sense in terms of like the UFC's marketing and like money machine idea, but I think that the styles match up really well. You're going to see some great unorthodox grappling. Their striking is both insane and their cardio is both insane. I think it's a great styles matchup, and I think ranking wise, like Holden said, I think Ferguson should fight down a little bit, build himself back up. We've seen it in the past where people who are on the top, once they kind of start that skid, they keep fighting guys at the very top, and they don't have that chance to build their confidence. You're seeing it with Tyron Woodley a little bit right now. So yeah, I would also like to see Ferguson fight down and kind of rebuild his confidence from a little bit of a lower level.
See if you guys agree with it, but this is the list that I wrote out. Was the Dustin versus Charles for the belt, but then you go and make Gaethje versus Chandler for the next title shot. You could even toss that on the same card like they did with Connor, Dustin Poirier, etc. Then, like I mentioned earlier, you could do the Tony versus RDA 2. And then going over to Connor, I mean, you could do the Connor versus Nate 3. It's a good chance for Connor to get back in the win column. It's going to make huge pay-per-view buys. It's a trilogy fight too. And I mean, I don't really see anywhere else for Connor to go. I mean, if he wants to keep active, he could always go Tony, Gaethje, even the RDA, because that fight never happened. But that's just what I have here. But definitely the Dustin Charles and Gaethje Chandler's the top 4 that I think should happen, definitely.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on Dustin Charles. I agree with you on Gaethje Chandler. They fight to see who gets the title shot next against the winner of DP and Oliveira, depending on how close DP and Oliveira is, right? Because if that is a super, super close fight, could warrant a rematch. For Connor, we talked about Tony fighting lower. For Connor, I think he's in this really weird position right now where he says he wants to come back. Is he a money fighter, or is he, is he a distinguished fighter? And I think he's an incredible fighter. He's an incredible striker. I think he has all the tools. He's world champion in 2 divisions. Great guy. Or great fighter, not great guy. But I don't think Diaz is the right move for Connor. I think that's the money fight move. I'd really like to see Hooker or Felder. If Connor is looking for a good opponent in that division to really bring himself there, I'd say a Hooker or Felder. Hooker's he lost to Chandler, who looked incredible, and he lost to Poirier. Felder, he's on a 2-fight losing skid right now, same as Hooker, and same as Connor. But the thing is, these guys are guys that are tough as nails and guys that come for wars. And that's the thing that, I don't think anybody wants to see Connor in there knock a guy out in 13 seconds anymore. Like, we've seen that from him. Now we want to see him, go to a war, have an amazing fight. We want to see something like the Nate Diaz versus McGregor too. Like one of those fights that had you on the edge of your seat and you're like, oh shit, this is a back and forth thing, right?
I mean,
that's my personal opinion on that.
I never thought about the Connor Hooker. I kind of like that one too, because both of them are coming off losses. It's a good chance for Hooker to kind of get his name back out there, get him close to the top again, and with a win over Connor. He gets a lot of attention out of that. And then same for Connor. I mean, it's a win over a good guy if he gets the win, gets him back in the win column. So I think that one's a good one too.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me, I guess. I would love to see Connor versus RDA. 'Cause I think, they did try to make that fight a long time ago. It never happened. And now at the point in their careers, they're both kind of like, they were at the top of the lightweight division. Now you could argue they're both kind of like in that top echelon, but not quite the top 5. I think Connor could be in the top 5, but again, he is coming off that loss. He hasn't won in the top 5 in a long time. So I think that is a fight that makes sense. Hooker also makes sense, but I would lean towards the RDA fight.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see either of those happening. But since we're still on the topic of just Connor, where do you guys, or how do you guys think Connor comes back from the loss? Like, what do you guys think he needs to change? Like, change of confidence, coach, work on checking calf kicks. What do you guys think?
Definitely not a changing coach. I think his career has been really built on the foundation of that, that attention from Kavanaugh. There's a thing, because you don't see the caliber of McGregor come out of that gym and a lot of other fighters. And I think that's because he has something special about him, and also he clicks with Kavanaugh in a way that, you rarely see a coach and a fighter, really hit that stride together. I think his loss to Poirier wasn't necessarily an indicator that he wasn't motivated or doesn't have the skills anymore. I think it was a perfect game plan by Poirier. And I also think if there's anything Connor needs to change, it's that he needs to dedicate himself 100% to MMA and stop thinking about boxing, right? Because he talked about it early on, like when the fight was just kind of rumors, how he wanted to fight a southpaw to get him ready for Manny. You can't use a top level UFC fight as preparation for something else. Like that has to be the means to the end in itself. And you saw it. He went in like a boxer, not that loose kind of unpredictable overall striking style that he usually goes in there with. And I don't think it was so much that he was tense and too stiff, like a lot of people have said. I think it was an intentional style change because he was looking more towards boxing in the future. I think he just has to commit himself 100% to being the martial artist that we saw in 2014, 2015, when he was doing, unpredictable movement drills and like focusing on a bunch of different traditional styles mixed with newer styles and just being innovative, and like that looseness.
He did also mention too that, like, not necessarily during the lead up, but I remember that when him and Dustin were going back and forth on Twitter a while ago, um, he did want to fight Dustin Poirier mainly because of his boxing abilities, because he did want to like kind of shape up for that possible Manny Pacquiao fight too, right?
Then change sports. Like as bad as it is to say, like Braden said everything right. Like if you're going to be a boxer, be a boxer. You know, it's he was so heavy. He was so heavy on his legs, and we always when you talk about McGregor, you gotta talk about the movement of McGregor, and he was so heavy. Boxing stance. He was so committed to boxing in that fight, just like Braden said. And I agree with Braden completely that changing coach, changing camp. I think he needs to change his mentality in training. Maybe he bought into his own hype a little bit, and wanted to pursue the boxing fight. Thought he could come back to MMA, then go back to boxing. But like Braden said, it's different tools. And the thing that made McGregor so incredible is the fact that he's just completely unpredictable, and he throws these things out of nowhere that just have insane power and can starch anybody, right? Um, a boxing stance, definitely a heavy boxing mindset makes you far less unpredictable. And once you especially eliminate that movement, you eliminate that transfer of weight in the legs. What can you do? And calf kicks are so smart. They're such a recent evolution, but especially against boxers, because your calves are responsible for almost all of your explosive power. And if you take that away from somebody, they, especially a boxer, they don't have that. They don't have the movement, and they don't have their explosiveness anymore. So yeah, Poirier. I didn't see Conor as a bad fighter in that fight. I saw Poirier as a better fighter. Would be the best way to describe it. So I would agree wholeheartedly with everything Braden said.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I would say is, while we are talking about this, and I believe this is all true, I've seen a lot of people online talk about um, Connor as if um, him changing styles was all a mistake in its own. But I think it is also important to at least acknowledge that fighting Eddie Alvarez and fighting Dustin Poirier are very different fights. So you can't expect him to go into both fights looking the exact same. I believe he did have to, and I was expecting him to look at least a little different. I just think he went too far. Poirier is a better boxer than Eddie, so I can see why, if Connor believed he was a better boxer than Poirier, he might lean towards making it that kind of fight. But again, I think he just went too far in that direction, if that makes sense.
Poirier just looked incredible too, and
Yeah.
I think a big thing to notice on top of those calf kicks is, Poirier even said, going in that second round, if he hit me with one more left hand, I would have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look in the second round and you look at the defensive head move, like just the head work and head movement and the footwork that Poirier was putting in was just absolutely incredible. And there were a couple of times where he just he would just perfectly slip and duck out of range and just like looked at Connor and kind of gave him like a finger wag, like no, like Poirier wasn't as easy to hit as Eddie was. And that's not anything bad about Eddie. That's just, once again, talking about how great Poirier is. And I think that was very underestimated by a lot of people coming into the fight. That they were like, oh, Connor's coming in. And you see a lot of casual fans, unfortunately, that are there. And they're just like, Poirier is just this average guy that beat Connor. No, he's not. He's a veteran of the sport. He's one of the best strikers in all of the sport right now. He is incredible. He's an elite level jiu-jitsu guy. And we saw in the first round that like Connor's takedown defense is amazing. And I don't think there's any way to get around that, especially when you watch that first round of Khabib. Connor's takedown defense is amazing. And Poirier was able to take him down. And then you saw Connor's strength against the cage, and he was able to contain Poirier against the cage. And I was like, oh my God, Connor looks amazing, right? So like Poirier just impressed the hell out of me in that fight. It was like I don't really know what Connor can do other than return to his style.
I think also like when you look at McGregor and Poirier, they're both boxing heavy martial artists, right? Like they have a very clear base in their boxing. But they're very different in the way they box, right? Because Connor's kind of like a sniper, whereas Poirier is very much like a volume kind of tear you down sort of fighter, right? So where they were fighting made a big difference as well. When they were in the middle of the cage, Connor was able to use a lot of his movement and pick those shots. But when Poirier got him against the cage and they were kind of in that pocket range, and he could kind of load on without having Connor bounce around and get all the angles that he wanted, it made it a very different kind of boxing match in MMA, right?
Which
So I think
was
that's also go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, like, agreeing with you there, which was crazy because even when Connor's leg was dead, um, his head movement when his back was against the cage, like Poirier would throw 5-shot combos and land maybe two, and it was just like, even though they were good shots when he landed them, I was just amazed that Connor, was back against the wall and he was still throwing out this amazing defensive work, right? So
And
it was
those
just incredible to
And those
watch.
defensive styles also have to do with like where you are in the octagon, right? Like Connor, the way he boxes, he uses a lot of head movement. And that works when you're outside in range because you can use your head movement to dodge two or three and then step out because you have that room. But when you're against the cage, you can dodge two, but when there's nowhere else to go, you're going to get hit with the end of that combo. And then,
Yeah, which is what we saw.
exactly. And Poirier's defense is not that he doesn't use head movement, he definitely does, but he also uses that kind of like Philly shell and MMA style kind of where he keeps that elbow up and the other hand up by his temple, which I think helps a lot more in those close combat situations rather than Connor's style. So his boxing style is much more effective in those kind of up against the fence exchanges.
Yeah, for sure. And that was something very interesting in the first round that Poirier's blocking actually left him open for a fair amount of straights from Connor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in the second round, seeing Poirier start moving his head more to avoid those straights was definitely a very smart evolution that he was able to catch between rounds and adapt to. Because in those first round, there were 2 or 3 times where Connor would just tap him up because Poirier, chin down, head forward, and he was blocking well, but Connor would just combo so well with those straights, and they're so fast and so powerful, man.
So here, hypothetical, obviously, but if say Connor gets matched up with any of these guys that we've said, so like I don't know, Gaethje, Hooker, anything like that, if he loses one more time, do you think Connor retires? You think he's over it and just tries to focus on boxing? Do you think he goes just back up to 170? Do you think he attempts to get to 145? Hypothetical.
I think what Dana said was right, that Connor holds all the cards. That guy's, and he talks about he's done everything he wanted to do in the sport. So it's really up to him. If he wants to make a run in the sport, he's going to have to dedicate himself to it. But like that guy could literally do anything. He has the money to do anything. He has the mentality to do anything. He could do anything he wants to do at this point in his career. So I don't even know if I was in that position, man, I would just be like, hey, screw you guys. I'm gonna go sit on a beach for the next 20 years of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say what happens if he loses because I think, fighting's so unpredictable that even if he loses, it could be a fight that, is a controversial decision. If he gets knocked out in the first round again, that's a different story. If he has like another war like the Nate Diaz 2 fight, but just, is edged out, it changes how he might come back and how his career will go forward. So it's hard to kind of predict what'll happen, right? It also depends who he fights as well, you know?
Mm. Yeah. So, uh, almost probably the second last question I have. This was the fun one I was talking about. But in your guys' opinion, who do you guys think right now could be literally anybody in the whole division? Who do you think is the most underrated lightweight right now that isn't necessarily getting a lot of shine? Isn't necessarily, yeah, it's just underrated, I guess.
Oh jeez. I would have two answers for this. Um, I'd say underrated right now would be. Oh gosh, it's so hard, but I'd say for somebody that's been in the UFC for a while, that always looks good, always shows up to fight, and I think people kind of view him as a stepping stone guy, but he seems super motivated right now, and I'm a big fan of his Muay Thai. Paul Felder, I think he's very underrated in that division, but also that's a division of killers, so that's like a hard thing. And then also, I think I think that Michael Chandler is kind of underrated in that division right now, and that's just because we haven't seen a lot of him.
Yeah.
But if you know, watching his Bellator fights, watching his previous highlights, Strikeforce Bellator, the guy's a great fighter, right? He's not only a striker that can throw bombs and puts heavy pressure on guys, but his wrestling is quite incredible too. And if you know, he talked about changing his mentality coming into the UFC, because he said it was going to be the toughest opponents of his career, and then he looked incredible against Hooker. So I think he is a bit underrated in the sense that hardcore fans are probably like, well, he's had one fight in the UFC, and it's just like one of those things that he is an incredible fighter, I think, and I think he deserves to be up there. And I've seen a lot of stuff online that he does that, you know, he's not cemented up there. He doesn't deserve to be up there. I definitely think he deserves to be up there, and I definitely think there's going to be a title shot coming for him 2021 or early 2022.
I also think that just in general, even if you're like in his position where you're a 3-time champion, just as soon as you're coming from Bellator, I think that kind of diminishes you a little bit until you start to kind of prove yourself in the UFC. Um, for whatever reason, I mean, it seems like that, especially for Chandler right now, right?
Yeah.
Braden?
Um, I would definitely agree with your answer about Felder. I think Felder's a difficult one, right? Because he loses, but he loses, it's competitive. Like every single fight that he loses, well, not every single fight, but almost every fight that he loses, you could argue that he won, like
He
pretty
was
much, right?
Oliveira's last loss too.
Yeah, he's always right there. He could fight the best guy in the world, and it would almost guaranteed be competitive, right? So, but the problem is, it's also not performances where you necessarily think that he gets robbed. It's just fights. It could go either way. So I don't know. It's something that has to be figured out, right? Like he does need to kind of get over that hump, in order to like cement that progress that he's trying to accomplish. But yeah, I think he's underrated just because of the fact that he's always in it, no matter who he's fighting. And then I think another guy that people forget about, because of the inactivity, but I think the skills are there to be at the top, is Makhachev, Islam. Super well rounded. He has the skills. He just has to, like Habib in the early days when he was getting injured all the time. He just has to figure out a way to be consistent in the division. And then once he can do that, and we can see him tested against those best guys, I think he has the potential to be up there with them.
Yeah. The one guy that I picked, he's number 10 in the he's in the top 10, obviously, and that's going to be Diego Ferreira. He's on a 6-fight win streak. He just came off a win over Anthony Pettis, where he got him in a rear naked choke. He's up against, I think it's Beneil Dariush next. I think that's coming up in the next coming months. But his last loss was 6 years ago, and that was actually to Dustin Poirier. And the only other loss other than that was Beneil Dariush. So if he's able to pull off that win against Beneil, I think he could be really up there in the rankings, anyways. But I haven't heard much about him, even though he's kind of doing well for himself, I guess.
My question with Ferreira is just what does he do against those top 5 guys? Or Connor's 6, so what does he do against those top 6 guys?
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you that he's a good fighter, but like, man, I can't see him breaking that top 6, at least right now, especially.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. I mean, 6-fight win streak is pretty impressive, but then again, none of the caliber of the guys that he did beat were the same as the top, even the top 9. So yeah, but I do also agree with Makachev. I didn't necessarily think of him at first, but it's going to be interesting to see where kind of he lands up this year, anyways. Because I know he was supposed to fight RDA. I'm not sure I think he might have a fight coming up. I think it's against Drew Dober, actually, if I can remember correctly now. So it'll be interesting year for him if he can stay healthy. All right. So basically, to close this off, in just one short sentence, predict the lightweight champion at the end of this year. So the final champion could be if they like the belt changes hands and then they eventually win it this year. But who do you think is going to be the champion at the end of 2021? Assuming that Khabib's not fighting anymore.
Assuming that Khabib is not fighting anymore, DP.
Assuming that Khabib is not fighting anymore, Chandler.
Interesting. I'd like DP to be champ, but if Oliveira gets that title shot, that'll be a tough fight. I think a tough fight.
I agree. I think that's his biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for both of them, really.
I think DP beats Oliveira, but I think DP versus Chandler. I think it comes down to Chandler's wrestling versus DP's jiu-jitsu. Just today I watched George St. Pierre versus BJ Ben too. And I think it'll be very something like that. Where we'll see, will Chandler's wrestling be like Pierre's in the sense that he kind of negates his elite level jiu-jitsu, or will, Poirier be able to hold him at guard, and be able to, because I don't think I have a question in my mind that Chandler can take Poirier down, but Poirier has such an incredible guard, and he even almost choked out Khabib, right? Like he threw up a guillotine on Khabib. So I'm interested for that, but I think Chandler would edge him out. But I think DP does beat Oliveira in that fight.
Cool. All right, so we'll just end it there. So thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to be tuned in next time. I don't know when that will be, but it'll be eventually. So done. Couldn't think of anything else.